All right. Is everyone seeing the Excel document?
Yes.
Awesome. Okay. So we have, we're just kind of imagining a scenario here when we thought about this training, thinking about what are some common challenges that people run into when they're using Excel and maybe some common scenarios. And we immediately thought about when we get data that's coming from different sources, could be from a database, some sort of survey, what have you, but we're kind of getting a data that's spit out into an Excel. It's maybe not the most friendly looking, it's not the easiest to read. So we wanted to kind of use that as our starting point. And as we think about getting that data ready to start analyzing, bringing things all together in one place so that we're able to see all the data that we need together and start using our data. So we have this intermediate workbook, and you can see at the bottom left-hand corner, there are 4 tabs. There's a tab called demographics. There's a visits tab, and this is where our data is actually living right now, demographic data and visit data. And then we have a tab, which is something that we'll come back around to a little later in today's session, which is the drop-down tab. And these are options that we'll be using for our drop-down list. Again, we'll come back to that. And then there's actually a tab here called working and in parentheses example. And so this is kind of our end goal of where we want to take our data today. And if you at any point want to come back and look at, okay, how was that done? Or, what's the formula that's behind, a given formula that we'll be looking at today, you can come back and actually look at the formulas here and see how things are set up. So it's kind of the behind the curtains, the answers at the back of the book, if you will. And then we also have a second sheet, worksheet that's called intermediate ASQ data. This has 1 tab, ASQ3. So this happens quite a bit too when we get data that's coming in from several different places. They might be in different worksheets, and we want to be able to bring those all together into the same place to be able to start working with that data and start analyzing. So I don't know about you, but my first kind of intuition or intuitive response when I think about bringing data together is like, okay, I'll just copy and paste everything into the place that I want to work. And we really recommend not using the copy and paste option, especially when we're moving whole sheets around workbooks, because it's really easy to, when you're selecting, maybe leave out some columns or leave out some rows, and that means you're going to end up with incomplete data on the other end. So what we recommend doing is being able to pull all of our data into one place through the move or copy function. And you can do that by opening the sheet that you would like to move. So in this case, we want to move the ASQ data onto our intermediate workbook. And we're going to right click on the cell or on the sheet tab. Go ahead and right click where it says ASQ3 on the bottom left-hand corner. And we get a menu that shows up that allows us to do quite a few different things. But what we're interested in right now is this move or copy option. So I'm going to go ahead and click that move or copy. And I get a dialog box that pulls up that's got several different options here. It says move selected sheets. So that's the ASQ3 sheet. That's what I'm going to be moving. And it's going to move it to the book that I select here. And I can see which files I currently have open. It would actually allow me to create an entirely new book if I wanted to do that. But right now I'm interested in moving this from the ASQ data workbook into our intermediate workbook. So that's the option that I'm going to choose. And now it's allowing me to choose where I want to place this tab on my new workbook. So I can put it before the demographics sheet, before the visits sheet, those 4 sheets that we saw on the other workbook, or I can move it to the end if I'd like. I'm going to actually place this between my demographics and my visit sheet. So I'm just going to click on visits, but really you can place it anywhere that you'd like, just a matter of how you'd like to organize things. And I'm definitely want to create a copy. And what this is going to do, it's going to actually create a copy in my intermediate workbook, and it's going to leave this original sheet where it's at. So I'm going to have a copy of my data on my other workbook. So once that is set up, I'm going to click OK, and it's automatically going to pop me over into my other workbook, the intermediate workbook. And that's great. So now I have, should have 5 tabs in this workbook, the demographics tab. It's inserted this ASQ3 tab, and I have my visits tab as well. So we're good to go here. We have all the data in one place. And this is going to be something that we're going to get into a little more in the advanced session. So if you're not signed up, we encourage you to do so, which is going to be next week. And that's how we tie pieces of data together. But for now, we just want to make sure we have everything in one place and that we're able to start using our data. And one thing I recommend is always having an original copy of your data. This has happened to me many times where I start editing on a sheet and I've gotten about halfway through, something happens, something goes wrong, and all of a sudden I've lost data. And you always want to make sure that you have a backup copy in order to be able to go back at any time if anything gets a little crazy. So what I do just to signal to myself, hey, this is your original copy, don't edit on this sheet. I actually change the color of the tabs, and we can do that just by coming in, selecting the tab that we want to change the color, right-clicking on the name, and we're getting that same menu. And what we're going to want to do is play with the tab color here. And we can choose any color we want, but for now I'm going to do this kind of nice orangey reddish color, which is just going to signal to me visually, hey, don't edit this. This is your original data. It's kind of like a stoplight. Don't go there. And I'm going to go ahead and do that on my other tabs as well. So I'm right-clicking on the tab name of the that I want to change the color. I'm getting this menu, and I can come through and change my tab color. And I'm going to make these all kind of this nice red. And the same with visits. Okay, so now I have my original data, and I want to just leave that in place, let that be. I can always come back to that if necessary. And now I want to be able to start what I'm going to call a working tab. So this is going to be the place that I want to actually make the edits, that I can start moving things around or creating formulas and have a place to work. So I'm going to create a copy. What we're going to be mostly working with today is the demographics tab. So I'm actually going to create a copy of that demographics tab. Again, right-clicking on that tab, and I'm going to come back into that same menu that we saw before, the mover copy menu. And this is going to allow me to create a copy in the same worksheet that I'm already working on. So I want to make sure that I am selecting the workbook that I'm currently on, that I'm going to send it to the same workbook that we're at, which is the intermediate workbook. And I wanted to create it before the current demographics sheet. And I want to create a copy. So I'm going to go ahead and select that option and click OK. And we're good. Now we should have 2 identical demographics tabs. One of them, it's added the little 2 in parentheses just to let me know this is different than the other one. So now I want to go ahead and change the name here on this tab. Again, right click, and I have the option to rename. And I'm just going to call this working. And you can just go ahead and type that in to change the name of your tab. And again, because I've said this red color to me is going to visually signal, stop, don't go there, don't edit on this tab. I want to make my working tab kind of a green color. So I'm going to go ahead, right click and come into the tab color, and I'm going to put this light green. So as long as I'm on this working tab, I know that I'm good. I have my original data in another place. I can always come back to that if necessary. And we can start kind of playing around with our data here. All right, and so one of the first things that we're going to want to do with this sheet, let's say this is just fresh out of a database, we want to be able to organize things a little bit. Right now, it just looks a little messy. I'm seeing all these number signs. I can't really see my header labels. Some of the data is hidden, and it's just not very friendly or easy to look at. So the first thing that I recommend doing is being able to resize the columns. And we can do that in several ways. We could do that one at a time by coming in between each column and manually changing the column size. Once we get this double-headed black arrow on that border between the columns, we can do that. Or I can do all of the columns at once. And I can do that by clicking up in the upper left-hand corner. There's a little gray triangle. I can click and you can see that selected my entire workbook. And I can again click and drag and manually change the size. And that's going to go ahead and actually change the size of all of my columns and give me columns that are all the same size, which can be really useful sometimes. But since I have data that's some columns, I want them to be long and I want some columns to be short, what I would recommend is with that same double-headed black arrow placed on any of these borders between the columns, I can double click and that's going to automatically adjust my column width to the length of the data. So now I'm able to at least visually see what's going on in each one of these cells. And you can see that those number signs have disappeared for me. And I'm gonna actually just go back here to show that again. We had these number signs, and what that's showing is this column is too short or too thin to show all the data that's happening in this cell. And I can actually tell that there's data across because when I click on this, or there's data behind these number signs, when I click on this cell, I can see up here in my formula bar that yes, there actually is a date. It's not just number signs. So again, we can manually adjust the columns by clicking and dragging between any of the column borders, and that's going to go ahead and give me enough space to show those dates. Or coming back up here to the left-hand corner, selecting all of my columns and either manually clicking and dragging or double clicking, which is going to automatically adjust everything for me. So that's just a quick tip. I also like to kind of space things out a little bit more, just visually. And so I recommend also spacing out the rows a little bit. And you can do that again by clicking that top left-hand corner and coming in between any of the rows, you'll get that same double-headed black arrow, and you can click and drag just slightly. And there we go. That's going to give me a little bit wider row. And so things are just kind of a little more spread out, a little easier to view. It just feels nicer. And then another thing that I recommend is being able to identify your column headers. You always want to have your column headers in this first row, row 1, and that helps us to know what's going on with our data. What are we actually looking at? I would come in and select this on the left hand. You can click on the 1 row. That's going to go ahead and select the whole row. And we can bold these column headers. We want to be able to distinguish this from our data because this is not actual data. This is just our column headers or our titles. And we can change the color of the column headers as well. I'm going to do this nice green. And we can also, so we're now able to visualize what our column headers are a little easier. But we still have the difficulty if I want to scroll down in my data and see, you know, maybe a client that's down way at the bottom, I've lost my column headers. I'm no longer able to see what was this date and this other date. I have a number here, I have another number over here. I don't know which ones these are. So we want to be able to freeze those column headers in place and have them visible as we scroll down. So we can do that by coming up into our menu options. Up here we have several menus or ribbons, you'll hear us call them. And we're going to come into the view ribbon. And we're going to actually freeze panes. And there's several options under freeze panes, but right now I'd like to freeze the top row. And it says keep the top row visible while scrolling through the rest of the worksheet. So I'm just going to go ahead and click that option, and we're going to test to see if that worked. Scroll down, and yes, I can still see my column headers even as I'm scrolling, which is really helpful. So fantastic, we're set to go there. Another thing that you might want to do, I'm going to come back to my home menu. Another thing you might want to do is be able to center these columns, headers, and this is just a matter of personal preference. You can center, and in fact, you could center all of the data. I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to select my whole workbook. I'm just going to center everything so that I'm just able to visually see what's going on in each one of the columns. And we do have some column headers that are kind of long. These ones over here, we have these long column headers and kind of just skinny data. So it's kind of taking up a lot of real estate right now. So what I'm going to do is Abby's favorite tip, which is wrap text. I'm going to go ahead and select my headers again and click this wrap text option. And what that's going to do, you can see it's already kind of moved things around. And you might be like, oh, where did that go? Where did my header go? But it's all there. We just need to expand this top row a little bit. And so great. Now we have the average monthly income, which is showing. I can make these columns a little thinner so that they're not using up so much space. Again, this is just your visual preference, whatever is going to be most useful for you as you navigate your workbook. But some of these things, it can seem like a minor detail, but it really makes the difference between feeling like you can manage and understand what's going on in your workbook and feeling like this is just chaos and I have no idea what's going on here. So again, just personal preference, but kind of some fun different options for you if you want to play with that. So. All right. And the other thing that my favorite tip, Excel tip, is putting on filters onto our workbook. And what filters allow us to do is to filter our data. We can choose a criteria that we want to only show certain parts of our data at a time. It's a really quick way to just drill down into a certain criteria. And it's also going to give us the option to sort. And there's several different sort options. It's going to make sure as it moves data around, all of the rows are going to stay together. So I don't know if you've ever had this where you've tried to manually sort things and maybe client data gets mixed up and moved around in different places. This is going to keep everything tied together, but it's going to allow us to sort quickly and to filter quickly. So you can actually click on any one of the cells here in our workbook. And again, we're on this home ribbon and we're going to come all the way over to the right hand and we have the sort and filter option. And yesterday someone was having a little trouble finding this. It was in a little different place in their version of Excel. So if you're working with a Mac version or a Windows version, or maybe even Google Sheets, you might see these in little different places, but just know that they're there, and you can always ask Google or ask the internal help on Excel and be like, okay, where is this option? But just know it's there if you're not able to immediately find it. So this is the sort and filter button, and Excel is great in that it shows when I hover my mouse over the option, it gives me this little message that says organize your data so it's easier to analyze. You can sort the selected data from smallest to largest, largest to smallest, or filter out specific values. So that's exactly what I want to do. I'm going to click that option. It brings up a drop-down menu. And I can go ahead and sort directly, but I want to put filters on my data actually. So I'm going to select the filter option. And as you can see, I've got these little drop downs that are automatically added to each one of my column headers. And in some of these cases, it looks like they're kind of covering up my column headers. So I'm going to go ahead and readjust our column widths. Again, upper left-hand corner, double click in between, oops, I dragged there. I want to double click in between any of the column headers, and things are looking good. I can read, well, let's see. There we go. I can now read all of my column headers. Awesome. Okay, and so these filters, you can just regular click, left click on any of these filter buttons. And again, I have several options. I can sort A to Z. I can sort Z to A, so alphabetical, reverse alphabetical order. And I'll also have the option to play with these filters. And what it's doing, it's giving me a list of all of the values that it's coming up with in this column. So right now I can see that under relationship, I have child, father, grandparent, and mother. And this can be really helpful just as a quick visual data quality check to see what values are showing up in a column. Sometimes, especially when we're entering data by hand, typing things in, some of these options might get spelled wrong. I might have grandpa instead of grandparent, so just some things I might want to come in and correct. But right now, just for an example, let's sort this A to Z to start with our sorting. And I can see that I've got this little arrow, this up arrow, that's all of a sudden on this filter. And looks like I've got all the children at top, then father, then grandparent, mother, just in alphabetical order. So it's grouped everything for me together really nicely. And again, I can do reverse alphabetical if I'd like, but now I want to play around a little bit with the filters. So right now it's selected, it's showing everyone in this data set. And if I click on this unselect the select all option, that's going to leave all these check marks blank. It's going to actually not show me anyone. But let's say I only want to see mothers. Let's show only mothers for a second. Click OK. And great, we're getting all of the mothers in our data set. And you can still see that these numbers, these row numbers that it's showing me, I'm starting actually up at the very top at 56. So I know that row 2 through row 55 are filtered out. They're still there. So I don't need to worry, my data's still in place, but I've just filtered it out and I'm only showing people that meet the criteria that I set up. So if I want to, I can clear these filters or I can come back and select everyone, either way. So awesome. All right. I don't know if there are any questions before we can take a break here to answer some questions.
I have a question.
Yeah.
if you want to make a row for reporting purposes, like you did the child and mother, can you just duplicate that whole relationship? Um, and then we could rename them. Is it just like the whole column and add it to the left?
If you wanted to add another relationship column, or
Yeah,
sorry, I'm not,
yes.
yeah.
Relationship, and then just click like this one is for child, the other one's for mother, then you could rename the top.
Oh, to separate out the data in the columns.
Mhm.
Yeah, you could do that. I would recommend in this case, leaving it as one column and using some of these filter options to isolate and drill down on some of these options. But definitely you could have, you know, a child, or sometimes people will call them even client, if that's who they consider the client to be, in one column. And you could insert a new column by clicking on the top column to the right of where you want to insert, right click and click insert. And we could say, you know, we could add another relationship column, or we could add another column that has some other identifying information.
Mm-hmm. But you would have to copy that whole column as you're adding it, and then that way you can choose which how to sort it by.
Yeah, I guess I'm not exactly sure what would be the end goal with that, to
Oh,
understand.
you're seeing the children and you're seeing the mothers. Or it's just an example, but then you can just copy the whole column and we can rename it, but it still sorts it um, by what you want. It's just I was just curious. But
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And it's really going to depend on what you're trying to do with your data. And so there's not one right or wrong way. If I wanted to show both children and mothers at the same time, I could do that by selecting only child and mother. That's an option as well. And that would allow me to see children. I would see children up top and I would see mothers at the bottom. But there definitely are cases where you'd like to have that as two separate pieces of data. Yeah.
I will also say, I mean, I'm not sure if this is getting at your question, but for analysis, often, and we'll get more into like deeper analysis next week, but usually it's good if you want to be able to distinguish children and parents and not just look at the whole family unit, to have each row be a different client. And that's what this data set is doing. So, you know, a child, you'll be able to just look at like the child's race and then also just distinguish the parents. And so that's why this data set is built. And I would say, you know, usually in doing reporting and stuff, it's good to have a line for each client. And then, and I think what maybe you were saying that you're interested in too is like looking at the connection. So how do I have the child by, you know, like the family together so I can look at them together? And what you could do is like a double sort. So first you have what Jen did is, you know, sorting by relationship. And then you could sort by case ID, which is actually what is tying them together as a family. So each family has a specific ID. The individual ID is for each individual person, but Jen just did that. And so now you see the case IDs are all clumped together. And so you have that whole family. You can really quickly see the child, father, and mother in that family all right next to each other, because and it will be always in that order because she first sorted alphabetically by relationship, so C, F, M, and then by case ID. So I'm not sure if that gets at your question, but.
no, it's very powerful, like data sorting. Thank you.
Yeah, no, this is really helpful. And especially when you're trying to do kind of do data clean as well, just make sure that your data quality is really high. This is going to allow you to kind of see if there's any holes, or if you have, be able to sort and see everything that's going on. So thanks for that question. Any other questions about organizing your data or filters, sorting?
Yes, Jennifer. Hi, is there a one button quick way to reset everything back to the original? Say if I have different formulas set and filtering, and I just want to go back to what I had originally because it was just a temporary look.
Yeah. The original, that's why we recommend keeping an
Yeah.
original tab. So that's your fail safe, tried and true way of making sure that everything is in its place. To remove these filters, let's say, okay, I've done my filtering, I've done my data quality check, I don't want these filters anymore. You can come back up into the sort and filter option, again on our data tab, or sorry, on our home tab.
Yeah.
And I can actually clear the filters. So that's going to remove, now I've removed all of my sorting. That's no longer sorting, or I can actually click the filter button again, and that's going to take the filters off. So now you can see I no longer have those drop down lists on each one of my options. But I'm just going to leave them on for now because they can be helpful. So, great question, thank you. And then as far as like removing formulas and that sort of stuff, Abby, do you know of any like magic reset button?
No.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think
Control Z, that's.
Yeah, the magic is always having your original raw data just in case.
Yeah. I wish there was a magic reset button. That would be great, especially when you don't have an original copy, if you forgot. Great question. Any other questions out there? Awesome. Well, if any other questions come up as we continue on, feel free to chat us as we move along. All right. So I had mentioned at the very beginning when we were looking at our tabs, the option of creating drop-down lists. And as we think about adding data into our data set, maybe manually adding some data, it can be really helpful to use some tools for data quality assurance, especially when we have a set number of choices. So I'm going to use the example here of the categories that BSK, the options that BSK uses for race and ethnicity. So in this data set, you can see that race and ethnicity are actually in two separate columns. And let's imagine that for reporting, I need to be able to translate that into what BSK has set up as the options for reporting. So in this case, when I have a preset list of options that I know that I always want to only use those options, I want to make sure I don't have any spelling errors, have any additional made up categories. I would like to use a drop-down list. And as you can see, we have our drop-down categories that are in our drop-down tab. I've pre-made this for this example, but if you were to make this on your own, you would create a new tab with this plus button on the side of our tabs to create a new sheet. It's created sheet 3, and then I would key in or copy and paste in the options that I have for my drop-down list. But for now, I'm just going to delete that because I actually already have one that's pre-made for this example. And I've copy and pasted in the BSK race and ethnicity options. And so it's like, I have Mexican, okay, Mexican American and Chicano, and then just Mexican. Okay, I was like, why do I have that twice? All right, so we have our options here, and I want to be able to set up a new column in my working tab. So again, this is where we're getting into editing or adding data. I'm going to add this column after my race and ethnicity columns that are already on my sheet. So I'm going to come over to the right-hand side of where I want to add the column, and you can right-click to insert. The other option that you can use is up here at the top, this insert button that allows me to insert a sheet column. So that's an option too. Generally in Excel, there are a few different ways to do things, which is great. Find the one that's most comfortable for you, the one that makes sense. You don't need to use or know all of the ways to do things, but just know that there are a few different options out there. So I've created my new column, and I'm going to call this BSK race and ethnicity. And always important to name your columns, because sometimes you come back to this worksheet like 6 months later and like, why did I do this? I don't understand what's going on. So I highly recommend labeling things. And we want to be able to create a list, a selection list, where we can choose from the options that we saw in our drop-down tab. All right, and so you can actually click on the cells where you'd like to, click on the cell where you'd like to add your drop-down list. So this is where I'd like my drop-down list to appear. And we're gonna go up here to our ribbons up at the top, or our menus, come over to the data option here, the data ribbon. And you can see that we have several options here. One of them, kind of more over to the right-hand side, is this data validation option. And as I hover my mouse over the data validation option, it says pick from a list of rules to limit the type of data that can be entered in a cell. So that's exactly what I want to do. I want to put some limits on what kind of data can go into this cell. I'm going to click that option, and I get a dialog box that asks me to set the validation criteria. And right now, this cell is allowing any value. I can type in anything I want. I can type in a formula, a number, a date, anything, and it'll allow it. But I actually want to limit this for my drop-down list. So I have several options here. I could limit this only to whole numbers, to decimals, to dates, to times, and those might be interesting or good options for you depending if you're doing another type of data entry. But right now I want to limit this to a list, to only allow a list. I'm going to ignore blanks, and I want it to show an in-cell drop-down. That's great. And now it's asking me for the source. Okay, where do you want me to get your list from? And I've got this little black arrow over here to the right-hand side. I think of it as like a little trampoline. And what it's going to allow me to do is go and select the list that I want to use. So I'm going to click that trampoline, and now I have a box that allows me to put in my data. You can manually write this in. I think the most easy is to just come over to the drop down or wherever my list is and select the options that I would like to use as my list. And I'm only going to select the options that I want to use, not the header at this point. The header is just for my internal use, my memory, like these are the BSK race and ethnicity options. And right now only want to select those options. So that's great. Looks like it's reading correctly. I can see I have these kind of green dotted lines going around my options. So that means it's selected. And it says drop downs A2 through A24. So that's great. I'm going to come back to this arrow. It's going to trampoline me back to my data validation box. And it looks like we're all set up. And I'm just going to click OK. And fantastic, that's taken me back to my working tab. And now all of a sudden you're seeing there is a little drop-down box to the right of my cell. And as I click that, I can see now I'm able to visualize all the options for BSK, race, and ethnicity. And so as I come through, I can go through and manually select. And I know that these are the options that I have. I'm not going to spell anything incorrectly. I'm not going to get some, made up option. I have more confidence that I'm going to get the data that I want to have. So right now we've only set this up for our first cell in our first row. And what I can do is there's a right below the drop down box, there's a little green dot. And when I put my mouse on that green dot, I get this dark black cross or X, and I can use that to drag things down. And that's actually gonna copy my data as well. So I don't want to do that. I just want to copy my drop down box. And you can see this is picking up, again, the same options that I have from my drop down list. And the other thing that I can do is on that same green dot, I can, instead of dragging down, I can double click, and that will automatically fill. It should automatically fill. Looks like it's not working. Well, looks like we're gonna have to drag things down for this one, which also works. I'm gonna drag it all the way down to the very end of my data. And I can see when I click on any of these cells now, I do have that drop down list. So we're set to go. And another nice thing about the drop down list, if you would rather not click into the options and manually select, you can also write the option out. So I can start writing Hispanic, Latino, or Spanish origin. If that's already been used in the column, it's going to pop up for me automatically. And for this person, white is the option. So I would type that in. It's not automatically filling because I don't have that option chosen yet in this column, but I can type it in, and if I've typed it in correctly, it will accept the answer. It will accept that as an answer, and it will allow me to input that text. I can't type any random text into this box because I'll get an error message which says this value doesn't match the data validation restrictions defined for this cell. So it says try again, you did not do that right. And I can go ahead and click retry, and I can type in the correct option. So it's just kind of a safety check when you're doing data entry, especially from data entry from a set of options that are already predefined. Awesome. And so I could go through and code everyone according to the VSK race and ethnicity options. We won't do that. If you would like to practice that on your own, go ahead and feel free. Awesome. I don't know if there are any questions about the drop-downs.
I have a question in the chat, if you can show again how to make that drop down go into all of the cells in that column.
Yeah, so that's a great question. What I would normally do is suggest doing this double click, but that wasn't working for me. So one option is to go to this bottom right-hand corner. We have this little green dot. And once we put our mouse on the top of that green dot, we're getting a black cross or X. And you can select that and pull that same formatting down. The other way to do it is just when you set things up on your data validation is to pre-select all the cells that you'd like the data validation to set up. So when I set things up, I only selected this first cell, but I could also, I'm gonna just create a new column to be able to show this. There we go. VSK race and ethnicity. 2. And I could go ahead. Oh, it's actually pulled. Excel is sometimes too smart for its own good. It's actually pulled these drop-down boxes, this drop-down list over because it's already set up in the column to the left. But I'm going to clear that out just for our example. So I'm going to select all of the cells. That's actually, sometimes it's like good that these things happen because this is what happens in real life. So I've created a new column. Let's say I don't want to have these drop down lists. How do I get rid of them? So I select all the cells where I want to have them not have the drop down lists, right click and actually click clear contents. And that's going to get rid of everything that's going on in these cells, but has not gotten rid of the drop down lists. Okay, well, that's probably a formatting issue there then.
For the taking off the drop downs, you can also go to, data validation and then clear validation. So if
There
you
you
select
go.
the full column,
Awesome.
and then data validation at the top.
Let's see.
Clear all.
Oh,
Or
clear
just
all. There we go. Awesome. Okay.
I also got one question. It's appearing as.
Actually, I'm gonna, if you don't mind, sorry, Abby, just gonna go through that process one more time of how you would, once we've cleared this out, how you could come through and do things all at once.
Yeah.
So you can go ahead and select all of the cells that are in this column, all the cells that I want to have that drop-down list happen in. So I've selected everything. And now I would just go ahead and create that rule again. So come back up into data validation, and it's going to apply this to all of the cells that I have selected. Select list, select where I want the list to come from, which is our drop-down options here. Pop back into our data validation options. Everything is set up, and click OK. So now we have set up this format for all of the rows in this column. We're getting that little drop-down list automatically. Thank you for that question. That's great. Go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, no. I actually think that was actually helpful to maybe answer this question. I got the screenshot of what Stephanie is seeing, and I'm thinking that what's happening, because what you're seeing is just the equation, the drop downs equation in the cell itself. So I'm thinking that that got entered instead of going through the process of selecting the cell and then going up to data validation and entering the source of that list up there. Maybe it was entered directly into the cell.
No.
No?
No.
All right, well, I'm not, that would have been my assumption. Unfortunately, I don't know, that's odd. I'm not sure why it's happening. Jen, do you have any other theories?
Not right now, but I think this could be a good time to take our 5-minute break. And Stephanie, if you don't mind sticking around, we can kind of troubleshoot and see what's happening there. So we can go ahead and take our 5-minute break. Feel free to step out for a few minutes and come back at 10 past. And Stephanie, if you feel like you'd rather take a break, then feel free to do that. Otherwise, we can do a little troubleshooting. So.
Actually, I just redid it and it worked. So I don't know what I did before, what I clicked on, but now the drop-down list came up. So
maybe
awesome.
Sometimes sincerely, that is the best answer. It's just glitchy for whatever reason. And, it's like the old unplug and plug in again.
That's my best troubleshooting and IT advice, especially for my parents. Like, just unplug it and plug it back in. It'll work. So awesome. Okay, great. Well, we'll see you all back here in 5 then. The participant guide. We got about halfway through the second activity. So in the second half, we'll be looking at conditional formatting, and then we're going to be looking at formulas. So I hope they were a restful 5 minutes. Your brain is refreshed and you're ready to jump into conditional formatting. All right. So conditional formatting is just, everyone I'm sure is familiar with the different formatting options that Excel gives us. We have on our home tab, we can change the font, we can make it bold, change the background color, change the font color, center things. There's all sorts of different options here to kind of highlight things or play around with formatting. And what conditional formatting does is it allows us to set that format up based on a rule. So based on any given criteria that we'd like to use, we can say, when this happens, when this given criteria happens, automatically change the format of this cell to show things a little differently. And this is going to allow us to quickly see data trends. We're going to be able to highlight certain things that are happening in our workbook. There's a ton of different options, and this is sky's the limit as far as creativity pretty much. So I'm just going to show a few common options that I find really helpful. The first one is highlight cells. And this can be really useful when we want to, really make things pop or be able to quickly visualize certain information based on a certain criteria. So what I'm going to do is just show a quick example here with the number of dependents. And this column is way over on the right-hand side of our workbook in column S, the number of dependents. So I'm going to go ahead and select this column, select the data that's, actually I'm going to select this whole column. I want to make sure that if I add any data in the future, I want to be able to make sure that this rule is all the way to the very bottom of the workbook. So I'm going to select this column, and up here on this home ribbon, I have this option for conditional formatting. And I'm going to go ahead and say, it says, when I hover over, it says easily spot trends and patterns in your data using bars, colors, and icons to visually highlight important values. So that's what I want to do. I'm going to go ahead and click, and I get a bunch of options here under conditional formatting. I have the option to highlight cells, set up rules for the top and bottom of my data bars, color scales. So again, icons, sky's the limit as far as creativity. Right now, I want to just set up a simple highlight rule. So let's say I have a new grant that's come in or a new program that's specifically going to reach families that have over 4 income dependents. So let's just imagine that's the rule that I want to set up. Anytime I get a new client that has over 4 income dependents, I want to be able to highlight that person. So I can come in here to highlight cell rules. And since I want to set up when things are greater than 4, I'm going to click this greater than button. And now I'm seeing this option to set up my criteria, format cells that are greater than, and I'm just going to say 4. And it says it gives me options of how I want this cell to format. And right now it says, do this light red fill with dark red text. And I want to just be able to change that to a green option. There are some preset options here at the bottom. I can set up a custom format. This green looks like it'll work for me. I'm going to click OK. So any cell that's greater than 4 is now going to be highlighted in my workbook. And I have also inadvertently highlighted this top cell or column header. And so in order to reestablish my previous formatting, I can use my format painter. And this is a really helpful tool as well, because what it does is it allows me to click on a cell that I like that format. This is what I want my header to be formatted as. Come up to, again, on the home ribbon, to this option for the format painter. And I can click that, and I can see that the cell that I have selected is now showing up in green. So this is the format that it's going to be painting, and I can paint that. I have a little paintbrush now next to my mouse. I can paint that onto my column S header, and we're back in business. So things are looking good, and I have my conditional formatting set up so that I only see folks with more than 4 income dependents. Another fun thing that I didn't discover until recently is if we come back into our filters options, I can actually sort by color. So I can put those light green colors up at the top if I'd like. So now I'm getting everyone who meets that rule is up at the top, or I can even filter by color. So if I want to filter everybody else out that doesn't meet that criteria, I'm now only showing people that have more than 4 income dependents. So those are just some kind of fun options that can allow you to highlight different cells based on a certain criteria. Another tool that can be really useful is the duplicate finder. Sometimes when we have multiple people doing data entry, or you're coming back after a long period and you're entering things again, we can easily have duplicates in our database or in our data set. And so one thing we can do to avoid that is do a data check based on individual ID. And I'm going to use individual ID because that's the piece of data that we have in this data set that should be a unique ID. So I should only have one individual ID per client. They should only be showing up once. So I'm going to click that column, which is column D. And again, I'm going to come into the conditional formatting option. And this is going to be a highlight rule. So I want anyone who's a duplicate to be highlighted. And the very bottom of my highlight rules, I can see that there's an option to highlight duplicate values. I'm going to click on that. And this says format cells that contain duplicates with values, duplicate values with light red fill. So that's great. It's going to show up in this light red. And I've clicked OK. And so it should be applying things. I don't see any duplicates up here at the top. But as I scroll down, okay, I see that I have one child that has the same individual ID number, same birthday, same service start date. So I know that for sure these are duplicates. I always recommend just doing a visual check because sometimes you might have some data that's, maybe there's a small difference and you want to be able to make sure that you're staying and only keeping the correct information. So again, we can do that same filter option here up at the top where we sort or filter by color. I'm going to actually filter by color here. And this is pulling out only my duplicates. And then it looks like I have 3 sets of duplicates, a child, a father, and a mother. And I'm just going to kind of scroll over here. Looks like everything else is lining up. So this is a true duplicate. Everything is the same. So I'm going to go ahead and delete that duplicate because I don't want that person showing up twice in my data set. I can delete the row by right-clicking on the row number. And once I do that, I can see that conditional formatting has disappeared because this person no longer meets my conditional formatting criteria. So I'm going to go ahead and delete again, right-click on the row number and just select delete row. And again, we've cleaned up another duplicate. And for our third one. So we no longer have duplicates in our data set, at least not by the individual ID, which should be our unique number. I'm going to go ahead and show everyone. So clear that filter. Okay, so everyone is showing up again, and we have done a little more data cleaning. So we have a higher data quality in our data set. All right. And another thing you might want to do to be able to visualize data quickly with this conditional formatting option are what we call data bars. And this is something that I would recommend using on a numeric field because it's going to allow us to quickly visualize those numbers. So as you can see right now, I have several different numbers in my data set. Obviously, I know that 2,800 is less than 10,000. I have 14,000, I have a 0. There's all sorts of numbers, but I don't have a quick visual sense of what's going on with this data. So I'm going to go ahead and click on this average monthly income total column. And again, we're going to apply conditional formatting up here at the top. And we have this third option here, which is called data bars. And what this is going to do is give me a visual based on the range of the values that are in this column. It's going to show a different length of data bar. And as I hover over these, I can kind of see a preview over here in my column. So this one's a gradient fill. There's some different color options going on. I'm gonna stick with this, let's see. Let's do this blue option, this blue data bar. Okay, so great. We have kind of a quick view, and as you can see, anyone that has 0 isn't showing up with, they have 0 in their data bar. And my max value is going to show up at the top. And it looks like people are pretty well organized by income. If I wanted to, I could also sort this by income from smallest to largest, let's say. And now I have just a quick view of average total income, and I'm able to visualize what's going on with these numbers. But it looks like, I don't know, I'm not really happy with how this has turned out actually, because this dark blue color is kind of hard to read when it overlaps with the number. And I want to make sure that we're able to read the number. So let's say I want to come back and edit this conditional formatting that I've set up. And I can do that by coming up to the conditional formatting option up at the top again. And at the very bottom, there's an option that says manage rules. And I'm going to click on that. And this is allowing me to see the rules that are set up. And right now it's showing the formatting rules for my current selection. And if I want to see the rules for the entire worksheet, I can do that as well by clicking entire worksheet. And now I can see, okay, I have my data bar rule set up. I have the duplicate value set up. And I have my cell value highlight rule set up. And let's say with this data bar, I want to edit it. So I'm going to select, it's showing up in blue now, and I can now edit this rule. And I wasn't really happy with how this dark blue turned out. So let's say I just want to be able to change the color. And there's all sorts of options here to be able to change this rule. But right now I just want to change the color. So I'm going to come back and select this kind of light blue color. I think that's going to be easier to read for my data bars. Great. And it still hasn't changed. If I select apply, it'll go ahead and make my changes. And that looks good. I like that. So I'm going to click OK. And as I scroll down, I can now read these values a little easier. And it looks like there's a question here in the chat about when you would use data bars. I would suggest using these when you have a numeric value. You could use these for the number of income dependents. You could use this for visit completion. That's kind of could be a fun one here. So I'm just going to select that, come back into conditional formatting, set up a data bar, and let's do this kind of green. So I can now see just really quickly have a visual check. And it looks like I have some people that have more than 100% of visitation completed. So some overachievers here. But this just allows me to see of all of the values that are in my data set, which ones are at the high end, which ones are at a midpoint, and which ones are at the low end.
Yeah. Sarah also asked, is it like a form of data visualization? And I know, when I'm completing reporting, sometimes, you know, you wouldn't necessarily use this just to get it to spit out the numbers that you need for reporting. Or also there's other times when, you know, you build pivot tables, which we'll get into next week, but build pivot tables and graphs out of your data. And again, maybe then this wouldn't be the tool that you would use. I see it as a tool in the places where I have used it is when I'm actually trying to get out of a data set, just like the example Jen's showing, like if I wanted to just quickly see what's going on in my data. Where I've used it is in opportunities where people are actually looking at the data set to see sort of trends or to pick out, yeah, what's happening with the data quickly from your source. So if you're creating another dashboard with graphs off of that and you're not ever going to come back to your original data, if you're just trying to clean the data to then pull it into other forms, you wouldn't necessarily use it. But I've worked for organizations where they like get this data set and then push print and then have just lines and lines and lines of data. And there's actually a lot of things like this that you can do to kind of combine your raw data with some sort of visualization. So I've used it for like a board who wants to see what's happening with this program and wants to see the raw data, but right. So yeah, I'm sure you all maybe can think of things where you're looking at your raw data set, and this can just make it a bit easier to sift through if you're wanting to glean something from the data set itself.
Yeah, I think it could be really helpful for monitoring as well. Monitoring completion, like with this visit completion example, I can see like who is has their visits completed, who's at the midway, and do some just some monitoring with that as well. That's a great question, Sarah. I don't know if there are any other questions about conditional formatting. And again, this is one of those, it's like one of those rabbit holes where literally you can play around and set up rules based on whatever's going to be useful to you. There's a bunch of different options here, so I'd encourage you to explore things. Awesome. Well, if any other questions come up further down the road, just let us know. But we can go ahead and move on here to the section on formulas. And there's a lot of times when we get the data that we need from a database, but there are other times when we need to be able to add in information based on a calculation. And that's what formulas are really useful for. There's a ton of different formulas out there, and by no means do you need to know all of them or memorize any of them. What I suggest when you're looking for a formula, when you know that you need to have a calculation or a process happen in your database, is to use Google. If you can just describe what you'd like done, there is someone out there in this world that has had the same problem and has wanted to do the same thing that you're doing. So just kind of describe what you'd like to do and get Excel somewhere in there in your search terms, and I'm sure someone will be able to give you at least kind of an idea of a formula that could be helpful for what you'd like to do. The other option for finding formulas is just to start typing. So Excel is going to understand if you put an equal sign, which is how all of our formulas start. If you start typing an equal sign, that you'd like to start typing a formula. And so you can actually, if you have an idea of what your formula is called, let's say I want to find an average, I can just start kind of typing in the A, okay, and I'm getting this whole list. It's got a ton, but let's just keep typing average, and yep, these options might be a little hard to see, but it's giving me suggestions of formulas that I might want to use. And this average one says, there's a description as well, returns the average arithmetic mean of its arguments, which can be numbers or names, arrays, or references that contain numbers. So that's great. That's exactly what I want to use. So I'm just going to finish typing out. You can type it in all caps. You don't have to. It's going to pick things up either way. And we always want to start our formula with parentheses. I'm actually going to not get into how to write out average, but just as a way for searching for formulas, that's one way that you can do it. Another way to do it is up here at the top of our ribbons, our menu options. So when we come over into the data ribbon, the formulas ribbon, that's where we're going to find the formulas. So we have this insert function option. We have a bunch of different options for different formulas that we might want to use. It even has like a recently used formulas option. So those might be your most common used ones. There's ones that use text, that use data and date and time. Sorry. There's trig functions. If anyone wanted to revisit high school trig, that would be a fun time. But these first ones are probably the ones that you're going to use most. And the other thing we can do is this. Oh, actually, before jumping into this, I also wanted to show the in the Excel workbook, in that big, thick guide, we have our top favorite 15 Excel formulas. These are things that we find really useful for the work that we do as the Capacity Collective, and can also be helpful, I believe, for a lot of you. So sum, average, finding the maximum, finding the minimum. There's a description here in this workbook, and also some examples of when you would want to use that. So take a look at these, and this can be a good place to start if you want to check out some different formulas. Awesome. All right, and again, like we said, we always want to start our formula with an equal sign, followed by the formula name, and then we're going to start with our parentheses. That's how we're going to start writing things out. All right, and if we want to do, what I would like to show now is the if function, or the if formula. This is really helpful, especially when we have a criteria that we want to set up, a statement that we need to say, is this statement true or false? And then have Excel return a value based on whether one value, if it's true, if that statement is true, and have it return a different value if that statement is false. And we can go ahead and on this formulas ribbon bar, we can do this insert function option up at the top hand corner. And let's see if I'm, looks like, yeah, this is where I'm placed as at the cell. So this is where my formula is going to end up. But for this example, actually, we want to create a new column. So that's, I'm going to come over here to individual language. Let's imagine that I want to be able to add a column here, right to the left of individual language. I'm going to add that column. And I want to be able to add a column that tells me whether or not an interpreter is needed for this client. So I'm just going to go ahead and name this, this column, interpreter needed. Okay. And I could come through and manually just enter in all this information, but since I know that my rule is going to be if their individual language is English, then they don't need an interpreter. If it's not English, then they will need an interpreter. So I have a clear criteria that things are set up on, so I can actually set up a formula to do all this data entry for me and not have to think too hard about things. Okay, so I'm here in my interpreter needed, my first cell here. And now we're going to go ahead and insert that function up at the top left-hand corner under our formulas ribbon. Click insert function. And I want to do an if formula. I know that's the type of formula I'd like to use, so I can go ahead and search for it. I go ahead and go on the search option. And it's giving me a bunch of different if options. Anytime if shows up, but I want to just use the plain old if function. And there's a description down here at the bottom, and it says checks whether condition is met and returns one value if true and another value if false. So yes, that's exactly what I want to do here. I'm going to click OK. And now Excel is prompting me to kind of set up the arguments or the different parts of this function. And the if function has 3 arguments or 3 parts. The first one is the logical test. And that's going to be my rule or my criteria, what the condition that I want to have met. And then it's going to have a value if true. So if that condition is met, this is what's going to spit out. And if that value is not true, or if it's false, this is what's going to happen. So I need to tell Excel what my condition is to get started. And I'm going to go ahead and select, I want to base it off of the individual language. So I'm going to select that cell, and you can see that it's brought that cell name into this logical test. So you can also write it out. I find it easier to just select, but this is the M2 cell. And so that's what it's picking up, M2. And I want to say if M2 is equal to the word English, that's my criteria. So if it's equal to the word English, and when I want to use a word or a string text, I always want to put it in quotes. So I'm going to start the quotes and I'm going to write the word English. That's great. All right. And what's this is saying is like, actually in this case, M2 says Spanish. So this criteria has not been met. This is actually going to return a false value. This is kind of giving me a preview of what's going to happen. And now I want to be able to write the value if true. So this is the value that's returned if this logical test is true. And what I want it to say is, I could just leave it as a blank, but I actually want to leave it as kind of a dash, and that's just going to let me know this does not apply. So I'm going to put that dash in between quotation marks as well. So just give me kind of it's almost going to look like a blank for me when I read my data, but it's just a little dash in between quotation marks. And then if that value is false, so if this individual language is not English, then I want to be able to say yes, an interpreter is needed. So I'm just going to type in my quotation marks and start typing in the response that I want it to spit out. Yes, interpreter needed. So, and I close my quotation marks, and that lets it know that's the value that I would like. So it's done this kind of example for me here on the side. Says, okay, actually M2 doesn't say English, so this value is going to show as false, and it's going to show as yes, interpreter needed. So it's showing down here again too, the formula result. Yes, interpreter is needed. So I'm going to click OK. And it looks like this is a little long for me, so I'm just going to widen my column, and we have our formula that's set up. And what you're actually seeing as the result of the form is the text that's the result of this formula. Yes, interpreter needed. You don't actually see in the cell what's all happening behind that value, what's going on with the formula. If you want to see that formula, you can come up here to the formula bar and see that, okay, I have my entire formula written out here. If M2 equals English, and then between each argument, Excel has added a little comma. This is my true value, my dash, in between quotation marks, another comma, and here I have my false value in quotation marks again. And it's closed things off with the parentheses, which just tells Excel, okay, I'm done writing my formula, we're good to go. So I have my formula set up, my rule set up in this interpreter needed column, but right now I only have this in one cell. So again, we can do this pull down option where we go to this bottom right-hand corner dot, green dot, and I'm gonna get this black cross or black X, and I can actually pull down, and we can see that it is now reading this formula instead of reading off cell M2, has actually pulled down, is now reading off of cell M3. And so on and so forth as we go down. And so we can see that this result, because this M5 cell says English, it's now giving me the result for that little dash that we had set up. And again, you can set up any criteria that you like with these if formulas for the true value, any criteria for the false value, just depends on what you're interested in doing. And we could go ahead and drag this all the way down. But what I would recommend is just double clicking on that little green dot in the bottom right-hand corner. And when we double click, it's just going to autofill all the way down. And as we scroll down, we can see that the formula has updated across this whole entire row, or sorry, across the entire column, and it's stopped at the end of my data. So it's, once I click down below my data, I actually don't have that, that formula happening anymore. So awesome. I don't know if there are any questions about if formulas. The other option you have with an if formula, and I would recommend this once you, or with any formula in general, once you get a little more comfortable with formulas, you can actually just start writing them in the cell. So if I wanted to, I'm gonna just clear out this, let's clear out this option here. And I could write this by hand as well. I could write it with an equal sign. I could put in my if. I can start with my parentheses, and Excel has given me some prompts here at the bottom saying, okay, you need to start out with your logical test, and that's going to be this cell. If that's equal to English, I want to make sure I'm putting it in quotation marks. And now it's saying, okay, to move on to the next step, you need to let me know when you're done with this one, and you can do that by putting in a comma. So that's great. And now it's prompting me to enter the value if true. And I'm just going to use our same value as what we had set up before. I want to make sure it's in quotation marks, value if true. And I'm done with that. So I'm going to do a little comma and value if false. And I'm going to say yes, interpreter needed. Fantastic. Close it out with my quotation marks. And now I'm done writing my formula. So I'm ready to put my closed parentheses in, and voila, we have the same formula that we've just written out by hand. But you can do either one of those options as you get to be more comfortable with formulas. Sometimes it's easier to just write things out. But definitely at the beginning, I really recommend this insert function option. And you can also get to this up here at the data bar, or the formula bar, sorry. There's this little FX that allows us to insert functions as well. And that's gonna take us to that same option. I actually already have a formula written here, so it's showing me the arguments as they're written. So, great. Any questions about if formulas or other formulas? We have a little time here, so I'm gonna jump into the date difference formula as well. But if there are any questions that come up as we move along, please feel free to put those in the chat or go ahead and interrupt too. So, all right, awesome. So another helpful formula that we found to be really useful is the date difference formula, or date diff. And what this allows us to do is to calculate the difference between two dates. A lot of times we need to be able to calculate age, or how long the person has been in a program, or how long it's been since they've exited a program. And so we need to be able to set up a calculation instead of, otherwise we're gonna have to manually look at the calendar and count the dates or count the months, and that can just be, that can be a lot of work. So what I'm going to do here is set up a formula to calculate our client's age. So what I want to do is, to start out, just insert a column And I can do that here, inserting to the left. And I'm going to make a column header that says age. And Excel is pretty smart. You can see it's already added my filter on. So we're set to go there. And to be able to calculate the difference in the age, we can actually have this show up as in days, the difference in days, the difference in months. And that might be really helpful if you're talking about infants, you know, you want to know 18 months, 19 months, or we can have this show up in years. And what I want to do here with ages, I want this to show up in years. And what I need to also have is I need to have my start date. So I have that as my birth date. That's great. That's going to be the place that I start my calculation. I need to have an end date, and that could be today. It could be the end of a reporting period. So if I want to think about the age at the end of the BSK reporting period, that might be an example that we would want to do for reporting. So on my drop downs sheet, I've actually included this date as a reference point for me as we write this formula, the BSK reporting end date. So that's what I'm going to use as my end date as I'm calculating what was this person's age on December 31st, 2020 at the end of reporting. And all right, so I can go ahead and start my formula. I'm going to start with an equal sign, and the date difference formula is called date diff. I'm going to go ahead and put my parentheses to open up my formula, and I want to start with my start date. So I'm going to select my start date here to the left, which is my birth date, and not my birthday, it's somebody's birth date. I'm going to put in a comma, and that's just lets Excel know that that part of the formula is done. And now I'm going to select my end date, and I'm going to want to navigate over to my drop downs tab. I want to select this BSK reporting end date as my reference point. And this just allows me to, if I want to come back in, 6 months from now and change that BSK reporting end date, I can do that really easily without having to change my formulas. It's going to reference that cell. So we've got that cell reference. We can see up here at the formula bar, I have drop downs in C2. So that's great. I'm going to put a comma there. And now I need to tell the formula, give me this calculation in days, in months, or in years. Days is going to be a D in quotation marks, months is an M in quotation marks, and years is a Y in quotation marks. So I'm just going to go ahead and click, oops, I'm going to do a capital Y, put that in quotation marks, and I can close out my formula with parentheses, click enter, and it's taking me back to the value that it's calculated here in my working book. But for some reason, this child is showing their calculated age as January 3rd, 1900. And that does not seem right to me. So I want to see what's going on here. Looks like I have an error happening. And this is because the format, so when I come back to the home ribbon, the format of this column is copied over from the previous column. It's set up as a date. So I want to set this up as a number, and that's going to allow me to show, yep, okay, age 3. I'm going to drop these decimal points. I don't really need to care about half years. I just want to know the rounded off number. So it looks like we have a person that was born in 2017, and at the end of 2020, their age was 3. So that makes sense. Looks like we're good to go. And now I've calculated the age for my first client, but I want to be able to do this for all my clients. So again, I can come down and bottom right-hand corner, drag this formula down. Just going to drag down a couple here, but all of a sudden I'm getting these number errors. So that something has gone wonky here with my formula. I'm just going to click on one of these errors and look up here in this formula bar and see what's going on. And I can see as I drug this formula down, this has moved down on the birth date. It's moved down from F2 to F3. So it's moved down one row, but it's also done the same on my drop down reference date. And I want to just keep that reference date in one place. I don't want to have to change that every single time. And so in order to do that, I want it to be referencing drop downs C2. So I'm going to go back up actually to our original formula here. I'm just going to edit this so that we're freezing that cell reference into place. And we can do that by adding a money sign before the C. And that's going to freeze our column as we drag the columns. And I also want to add a money sign before the 2. And that's our row number. That's going to freeze our row. So that's going to leave that reference point just stuck in place so that whenever I move this formula around, it's always pulling off of that date. So now I'm going to drag this down, see if things are working. Yeah, this looks awesome. Looks like things are calculating correctly. I can go ahead and double click if I'm ready to copy this all the way down. And now I'm seeing, I really hadn't noticed this too much before with birth dates, but it looks like I have someone who is age 120. And that is probably not correct. So I'm looking at their birth date. I have 2 people, a father and a mother, that say they were born on January 1st, 1900. So either they are very aged parents and they've aged really well, or that's an error. And I'm just gonna go ahead and set up a filter here. Just quickly, let's see if I can show only the people that are aged 120. And okay, actually it looks like I have 4 folks. So I would wanna highlight this. I'm just gonna manually highlight here. You could set up a rule as well, a conditional formatting rule. I'm just gonna manually highlight as a note to myself, okay, you need to come back and find these people's real birth date because they were not born January 1st, 1900. And they are not 120 years old. Awesome. And again, if I want to be able to come back, let's say 6 months from now, I want to update this formula. Now my BSK reporting end date, let's say it's 6/30/2021. I can update this date, my reference date. And now my formulas should be reading off of that. So now instead of showing these folks as 120, they are now 121. And things should be just aged, calculating automatically off of that reference date. The other thing I can do here, if I want to just show their actual date, their updated date, birth date or age, sorry, based on today, instead of writing in the date manually every time I come into my workbook, I can use the today option, the today formula. So I can use the equal sign, write out the word today, and I can just leave these formulas or these parentheses blank. And we're getting March 12th, 2021. And now ages are calculating based off of today. And anytime I open up this workbook, this date is going to automatically update. So I would want to change, for sure, I'd want to change my header here and say, this is today, right? Another option is to be able to actually, instead of using it as a reference point to that drop-down sheet, you could actually embed this into your formula. So I'm going to take out my end date here, and I'm going to write the word today, and I'm going to add those empty brackets or parentheses. click OK, and now actually have that reference, that end date reference point within my formula. So just a few different options of how to do things. I don't know if we have a few more minutes here for questions. I don't know if any questions have come up as we've gone through that.
There's one
Yeah,
question. Oh, go ahead, Rubit.
Can you let me know how you changed the age column, how it showed up as like a date to the years?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we're going to go ahead up here on our home ribbon. We have all these different format options, and there's a drop down list here that allows us to choose the cell format. And there's a general option that has no specific format. There is several different options here: numbers, currencies, a short, and it gives me kind of an example here of how it's going to spit things out. Short date, long date, percentages. So let's say I wanted to show this as a percentage, which would be weird. I don't know why I'd want to show age as a percentage, but it's going to automatically add that percentage sign at the end. And it's not that it actually has changed the data, it's just how it's showing it. So if I want to show it again as a number, I can come back and select this as a number. And sometimes when you get weird things showing up, this can also happen with birth dates. So if a date is set up to show up as a number, like this will happen a lot of times when I've got like a column header that's telling me, okay, this information should be a date, but I'm getting these 5-digit numbers. It's actually a code that, it's not random. It's a code that Excel has that gives each date a 5-digit number, but not really helpful for me as I'm trying to read dates. So I would want to come up here to my formatting options and change that back to, let's say, short date. So great question.
Thank you.
And since we just have like 2 minutes left, I'm going to copy and paste the evaluation again into the chat. And yeah, before you sign off, you could complete that for us. That would be awesome.
Yeah. Thank you guys so much for joining us today. And if any other questions come up, feel free to email us. We'll also be sending out this recording in the next couple of days. So thank you all, and